Mr. Simi and his stupid wife Betty raised all their ugly, toothless kids under their neighbors' houses. Everywhere they all went, you could always rest assured Miss Betty Elmo Dillard and her idiot husband, Mr. Simi, would both be loudly bickering among themselves about something stupid one of their 8 crazy kids had done, as she stood there as skinny as a rail with lots of loose plaits and rollers loosely scattered all over her small kinky head, her big flat feet spread apart nearly 4 feet, pointing out in opposite direction, her big toothless mouth sprung wide open while screaming and yelling so loud she could be clearly heard 10 blocks away, always angrily squared off against her ugly blabbermouth toothless husband, Mr. Simi Solo Dillard, as he stood there with his big bloodshot eyes bulging out nearly 2 inches, his long nasty-looking tongue hanging out halfway down to his ashy knees, his big belly stuck out, looking like a 9-month pregnant woman, as they went back and forth word for word in front of nearly 1,100 onlookers. Just before his ugly, hot-tempered wife, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, would angrily rush over, haul off and loudly slap his huge, ugly face halfway off, take off running, and start loudly giggling as he stood there frozen in his crazy tracks, angry, stunned, and throwing several fits of rage, loudly calling her an ugly, stupid-looking ignoramus, as she stood there giggling herself almost unconscious and repeatedly yelling out, "Simi, you ugly, destroyed idiot, you. That's exactly what you get. That blame you. That's exactly what you get." Then after he angrily chased her all over town, looking just like a huge overstuffed elephant, while falling down flat on his ugly face nearly 400 times in a row and loudly gasping for air, they would both reluctantly return back home to all 19 of their ugly, toothless kids who stood on their small broken porch with their big toothless mouths sprung wide open and loudly yelling, screaming, hooping, and hollering while jumping up and down as naked as jaybirds and as barefooted as geese. On and on they'd all go, screaming and yelling loud and louder while splashing in the mud, swinging on doors and turning over trash cans, strolling little trash and debris all over their small, filthy yard, and totally destroying all their neighbors' property piece by piece. Every now and then, just to somehow, some way shut them all up, their ugly, kinky-headed, lunatic mother would angrily reach and grab whatever she could get her huge callous hands on and savagely chase them all right smack dab under all their neighbors' houses while running full speed as they all ripped and ran while loudly bumping and banging their small knotty heads and ducking for cover. On and on she and her ugly pot-bellied, flat-footed husband, Mr. Simi Solo Dillard, would angrily chase them all as he tirelessly ran behind them all, swinging left and right, trying his crazy best to somehow, some way knock all their small, knotty heads completely off while consistently tripping, stumbling, and falling down flat on his huge, ugly face over and over again, nonstop for nearly 9 hours in a row, as all their nosy neighbors and everybody else laughingly cheered them both on. Sometimes because their stupid lunatic daddy, Mr. Simi Solo Dillard, was so fat, overstuffed, and clumsy, he would get himself stuck knee-deep in the mud and stand there throwing several angry fits of rage, as all his 19 crazy kids stood there with all their big toothless mouths sprung wide open, loudly laughing, sniggling and giggling their small knotty heads nearly off all day long, while his ugly ankle-long dress-wearing lunatic wife, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, repeatedly hauled off and loudly slapped his huge contorted face halfway off nearly 200 consecutive times, as everybody else stood there loudly laughing, and he stood there jumping up and down, slinging mud as mad as a mule. Then after tirelessly struggling for several more days to get himself out, Mr. Simi Solo Dillard finally popped out, flat feet and all, and continued savagely chasing all 19 of his ugly, toothless kids right back under all their nosy neighbors' houses so many times until none of them no longer even stayed at home. They would always just crawl under, dash under, or even quickly run under whichever house they saw first whenever their lunatic parents would take off after them, angrily swinging left and right, running full speed as they endlessly ducked for cover. Sometimes in their desperate attempt to somehow, some way get all 19 of them would run right smack dab through Miss Lucy Flinders Fluke's small nasty house, strolling wet clothes, cooking pots, broken furniture, paint buckets, whatnots, wasted food, trash, litter, debris, and everything else as they tore down doors, broke out windows, knocked down waste baskets, and did everything else. Headed straight for Mr. Jesse Wilson Dover's small stinky outhouse, where they'd all crowd inside trying their crazy best to hide, as their ugly flat-footed pot-bellied daddy ran behind them all full speed, tripping, stumbling, and falling down flat on his ugly face every few feet or so, almost 300 times. As their kinky-headed lunatic mama, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, closely ran behind, cheering him on, while loudly laughing, sniggling, and giggling her crazy head nearly off almost 200 times in a row. Sometime in his desperate, idiotic attempt to knock them all down, he would aimlessly miss and loudly knock his ugly, stupid wife, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, kinky head nearly off, causing her to land nearly 75 feet away with her crazy heels stuck straight up in the air. Her small beady eyes all bucked and bloodshot, and her big toothless mouth sprung wide open as she lay there, stuck knee-deep in the mud, vigorously rubbing his huge callous fist that had almost killed her with his, and loudly laughing, sniggling, and giggling his huge knotty head nearly off while yelling out, "That blame you, Betty, you ugly, toothless idiot, you. That's exactly what you get for getting in my that blame way," as he quickly jumped back up and took back off, running full speed, chasing all 19 of his crazy kids, while his ugly, flat-footed, crazy-looking, toothless wife, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, still laid there flat on her crazy back with both her big, flat feet stuck straight up in the air, throwing several angry fits of rage, as upset, frustrated, and without any question, as mad as she could possibly be. Then as he stood there for almost 2 more hours with his big blabber mouth sprung open almost 3 feet across in diameter, still loudly laughing, his ugly lunatic wife, Miss Betty, and all 19 of his ugly, crazy-looking kids ran right smack dab under Mr. Nola Gibson's Burke's small, nasty house so fast and hard until they tore loose her entire foundation, brick, stump, floor, board, and all, as they all loudly bumped and banged their small, knotty heads so hard until it could be heard 5 blocks away. Then, just like always, as they all lay there stuck in the mud under her small, filthy, trash-littered house that had completely collapsed down on top of them all, leaving only their small, knotty heads stuck out with their big blabber mouths sprung wide open, loudly yelling, screaming, hooping, and hollering nonstop for nearly 1 week straight, here came Mr. Nola Gibson Banks running full speed, headed straight for Mr. Simmy Solo Dillard with both her small fists tightly balled up as she rushed over, hauled off, and savagely banged him upside his huge, lopsided head while yelling out, "That blame you, Mr. Simmy, why you ugly, pot-bellied, toothless, ignoramus, you. Bring your stupid-looking rump over here and get all your dat-blame crazy, toothless young'un from under my dat-gum house, you stupid-looking, blabber-mouthing idiot, you," as she once again hauled off and with all her 87-year-old might loudly banged him several more times right smack dab upside his huge, ugly head as he took off running full speed over to her small, filthy, now torn up and completely collapsed house, along with his ugly, toothless, ankle-long, dress-wearing, barefooted wife, Miss Betty, where they both, piece by piece, painstakingly pulled up, plucked out, and dug out all their 19 crazy, toothless, screaming, yelling, hooping, and hollering ugly kids and took them all right back, one by crazy one, home, and stuffed them all in bed as nasty-looking, filthy, wet, tired, smelling, as dirty as they all could possibly be. Then, just like always, you could rest assured that at 4:30 each morning, there they'd both stand outside in their small chicken-littered yard, loudly bickering and arguing among themselves about something stupid, about something one of their crazy kids had done. As she stood there, skinny as a rail, with lots of loose plaits and rollers, loosely scattered all over her small, kinky head, her big, flat feet spread apart nearly 4 feet, pointing out in opposite direction, her big toothless mouth sprung wide open while screaming and yelling so loud she could be clearly heard 10 blocks away, always angrily squared off against her ugly, blabber-mouthing, toothless husband, Mr. Simmy Solo Dillard, as he stood there with his big bloodshot eyes bulging out nearly 2 2 full inches, his long, nasty-looking tongue hanging out halfway down to his ashy knees, his big belly sticking out, looking like a 9-month pregnant woman, as they both went back and forth, loudly slanting and maligning each other in front of nearly 1,100 laughing onlookers. Just before his ugly, hot-tempered, toothless wife, Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, would angrily rush over, haul off, and loudly slap his huge, ugly face halfway off, take off running, and start loudly giggling as he stood there, frozen in his crazy tracks, angry, stunned, and throwing several fits of rage, loudly calling her a ugly, stupid-looking ignoramus, as she stood there, giggling herself almost unconscious and repeatedly yelling out, "Simmy, you ugly, destroyed idiot, you! That's exactly what you get, that blame you. That's exactly what you get." Then after he angrily chased her all over town, looking just like a huge overstuffed elephant, while falling down flat on his ugly face nearly 400 times in a row and loudly gasping for air, they would both reluctantly return back home, all 19 of their ugly, toothless kids who stood on their small, broken-down porch with their big, toothless mouths sprung wide open and loudly yelling, screaming, hooping and hollering louder and louder while jumping up and down as naked as jaybirds and as barefooted as geese. On and on they'd all go, screaming and yelling louder and louder while splashing in the mud, swinging on doors, turning over trash cans, strolling little trash and debris all over their small, filthy yard and totally destroying all their neighbors' property, piece by piece, while both of their ugly lunatic parents, Mr. Simmy and Miss Betty Elmo Dillard, stood there loudly laughing, sniggering, and giggling all day long and did absolutely nothing at all.